Today I wanted to go ahead and try and break down the differences between the Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet in terms of offhand weapons for the Rapier. Try and break down their playstyles, their pros and cons, because I do think they kind of function as polar opposites for the Rapier. But hopefully by the end of the video you can kind of get a better idea of which weapon is going to suit your individual playstyle. Now I want to apologize in advance for not having any Ice Gauntlet clips for this video, as the last beta was 4 days long, so I wanted to try and maximize my time and get as much fights in with this setup as I could, but we're still going to go in depth with the Ice Gauntlet. Starting with the Fire Staff though, it is a very high mobility and sustained pressure or sustained damage weapon. And once you start leveling it up and getting into some of the deeper passives, it ends up being a pretty high burst potential weapon as well. Now, the main selling point, I believe, for the Fire Staff was or is Burnout, the gap closer. Especially once you upgrade it, which I feel you would do for any ability. The amount of range that it offers when you think about the overall mobility that everybody has in the game and how much is available on each weapon, it just ends up being so much more utility that you have over everybody else, especially when you combine that with the Fléché ability on the Rapier. You can end up closing, pretty crazy amounts of distance or creating it to try and get away and kind of recoup and heal to get back into the fight. In addition to that, the amount of utility that this ability has is honestly almost too good in my opinion. In addition to the amount of distance you can cover, all Fire Staff abilities apply the burning dot or burning debuff, meaning you can end up using this ability both to try and create some distance and continue pressure on your opponent, because it does a initial hit, which is I believe around 100 or 120% of your weapon damage, and then it also applies the strongest damage over time out of any of the abilities on the Fire Staff. So you can end up using it in situations where you can apply a food buff, for example, turn flame dash through a group of enemies, which is one of my favorite ways to use it, because changing directions makes it a lot harder for people to stick on you and land abilities. But you can turn on people, burn out through them, apply the damage and the dot, and create distance to allow yourself to still hopefully heal from your food buff and still apply pressure from your heavy attack and your abilities. So the burnout is one of the best abilities, and it's one of the reasons why the Fire Staff is probably my favorite setup to run with the Rapier, because like I said, it just turns the weapon into a really mobile setup. The other part of the Fire Staff that is also really good, but does take a little bit of time to get to because you need to get some passives that are deeper in the tree, are the two in the Fire Mage tree that give you an extra 15% crit and 20% crit damage. It does take a little bit more time, but once you do get those passives, it starts to make it to where you can start bursting people on your Fire Staff alone. Because generally the way I like to use the Fire Staff is after I go for a combo on my Rapier, I like to switch to my Fire Staff and kind of poke them to just keep my my pressure up on them. But once you get these passives, you can end up bursting people down with just a couple of heavy attacks and a fireball. So as you level it up, it ends up becoming as strong as your Rapier, and you can start bursting people with your Fire Staff as well. Jumping over to the Ice Gauntlet, while it doesn't have the mobility or the burst potential that the Fire Staff has, the way that it makes up for it is in the sheer amount of beefiness and defensive passives that you get from the tree that really help make up for the lack of defenses that the Rapier has. And on top of that, you get a amazing amount of area denial through the form of Ice Globe and the Ice Shower ability. Now, I want to talk about the Ice Shower ability really quick because it's, up until this last beta, really wasn't that good of an ability. It didn't snare you for nearly long enough, excuse me, and people could just kind of roll dodge through it and could continue chasing you. But they've buffed it in the last beta to where you get hard snared for, I believe, a second or two while you're in the shower. You can't use any, I believe you can't use any abilities, and you can't roll dodge. And even once you leave the field, you're still snared for 3 seconds. And it's a very, very strong ability now. On top of that, because of the fact that you're guaranteed a hard snare on the opponent, it allows you to set up Rapier combos now. So before, where the Ice Gauntlet didn't really have much offensive potential, you now are able to get that through Ice Shower by being able to set up your combos a little bit easier, because as you've kind of noticed, the Rapier doesn't have the same type of homing that a lot of the other weapons do. You kind of have to have your crosshair directly on the opponent, or your attacks will kind of miss a lot of the time. So having somebody who's literally in one spot makes it, a lot nicer to be able to land your Rapier combos. In addition to that, I believe the Ice Prison ability, or the Entomb, is potentially one of the best abilities as well, because once you get better with it, you can end up literally resetting the fight for yourself while keeping your opponents under pressure. Now, I want to kind of stress, once you get good at it, because it's one of those things that you have to practice the timing with, because you can end up using it in situations where you're really not doing anything if your opponent has their cooldowns or are not under any pressure. Ideally, the way you want to use it is with one of the passives. When you use it while you're in any one of your fields, you get a 20% reduction on your abilities. And on top of that, you're regenerating mana and health while you're in it. So you want to try and pop a food buff and get some sort of snare or CC on your opponent to try and force some cooldowns before you pop it, so that you're going to be ahead of your opponent in their fight. But I do believe that this is definitely one of the stronger abilities, and with some practice can really, really turn some fights into some nasty engagements. But yeah, overall, I do think that they offer different playstyles for the Rapier. The Fire Staff it offers a much more aggressive and more mobile setup, so where you can be constantly applying pressure, whether that be through your ranged heavy and light attacks, your ranged abilities with Fireball, or your gap closer with Burnout, being able to reset your position while applying pressure and allowing yourself some time to heal. Whereas the Ice Gauntlet is a little bit of a slower pace, but a much more controlled and area denial type setup, where your combos are going to be a little bit more timed, where you're trying to time your combos around your Ice Shower and your Ice Prison ability. But as I mentioned, they are both different playstyles, and I think they both have a place. It just really comes down to whether or not you prefer a faster aggressive playstyle or a slower, more defensive playstyle. But yeah, those are my thoughts for the weapons. If you enjoyed this kind of video, do let me know in the comments, and definitely hit that like and subscribe button, because we're going to be pumping out that New World content once the game launches. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.